To recap, this is Tony and Julian. They met a few years ago, and once they got past that awkward shake hands or fist bump stage, they found they really enjoyed working together and opened a restaurant. They hired me to help them make money, and now they're learning how to cost food accurately. So far, we have talked about some of the basics and converted one of Julian's home recipes into one that is restaurant-proof. We also discussed the difference in weighing food and measuring food and when to use each method. Most recently, we reviewed where to find accurate pricing for each ingredient and how to calculate the cost of those ingredients. We have changed over our recipes from how we think to the way they are effective in a professional kitchen. Here, we will take our ingredient cost, apply it to the recipes, and determine our recipe cost. Yield is an important concept in recipes. Basically, yield tells us how much we will have of any one item after preparation of the ingredient itself, or even the entire recipe. This recipe will yield 4 cups of rice, which Tony and Julian have decided is 6 portions. Yield also pertains to each ingredient itself. For example, the picadillo recipe accounts for a 1/4 cup of green olives diced. How do you know how many green olives it will take to get to that measurement? Raw weight refers to the weight at which you purchased the item. Yield weight is the weight of the item after the unusable parts have been removed. A great example are green peppers. You can't use the seeds or stem of the pepper, though they account for some of its weight. Raw weight is the exact weight of the pepper whole, while yield weight is the weight of the same pepper once those parts are removed. There is no exact for how much that is with each vegetable, because every recipe may account for something different. For example, our recipe calls for diced peppers, but what if we also had a dish of stuffed green peppers? The preparation of that pepper would be different, therefore achieving a different yield. Same goes for proteins. Proteins have fats and other natural juices. Tony has a pork dish she wants to make. Pork 2 ways. One is smoked, the other is pulled. The smoked version will lose less fat in the cooking process than the pulled pork. She will need to make the dish several times and see what the weight loss of each style of cooking will be. The yield in each pork will be different. Therefore, the same sized pork shoulder will have different costs. The trick here is to weigh the items before the preparation and after, calculating how much percentage is lost. If Julian's recipe for picadillo accounts for 3/4 pound of green peppers, but he knows he loses about 20% of the pepper while dicing, he now needs to change his calculation. Instead of accounting for 12 ounces of green peppers in the recipe, he needs to account for 12.8 or 13 ounces of green bell peppers in his recipe. Prep recipe cost is how much you will need to spend to make any one prep recipe. These are items that you will typically make in a large quantity to use into the plated dish. As you create these prep recipes, it is important to note the yield or how much of that item you end up with when you make the recipe. You won't make just 1 meatball at a time, you might make 40. You don't just make picadillo for one, you make picadillo by the pound for the many. To calculate, you will first determine how much each ingredient costs, multiplied by the total amount used of that ingredient. Remember to take into account its yield weight. Once you have determined the total cost of each ingredient, you will add those together to determine the cost of the entire recipe. Tony and Julian are going to take some of their prep recipes and start adding some of the easy cost items that have no waste or diminishing yield weight. You should too. Also, practice with your food to determine how much difference there is between raw weight and yield weight. Start costing out these prep recipes. In the next video, we will discuss final plate cost and overall food cost.